All right, welcome back to What Are We Watching? I'm John Corto, and I want to open today's show with a thank you. I want to do a shout out to Ben, Sam, Emily, Mark, and Paul, who over the last couple of weeks joined us on stream to talk about a variety of different project films, and that's ultimately why. It's like why that's sort of what I'm really looking to do with this channel as it moves forward, and all of them brought different perspectives on many varying different and interesting movies, and the conversation is always tremendously appreciated. And uh, I'm glad you guys came on. I hope you guys come back and talk to me some more. But in any case, so, moving on to the topics for today, we've got sort of a big topic with one battle after another, winning Best Picture, and then I've got a couple of movie reviews to go through. But so you'll notice the title of this particular live stream, "The Beer Goggles We All Wear," and I particularly like the analogy of the beer goggles because you can apply it to basically everybody. And this is before I'll extrapolate on that in a quick second, but let's want the like one battle after another, one best picture, and me being like, I would say politically in the center, a couple of steps to the right, like it would have that hyperbolic response of like, oh, God, for the movie, the political violence, they're promoting, and like there's that gut reaction on some levels is fair, but I mean that is sort of the conservative beer. There's conservative beer goggles. Like you can say take conservatives and put beer goggles on them. You can put beer goggles on liberals, and I certainly myself have looked through beer goggles before. So I like the analogy. So I did commit to like I wanted to talk about the film. And I saw it in theaters when it came out, but in the interest of being completely fair, you need to. And I think with any film, usually you need to give it a good old second viewing to see, what did I miss? And on second viewing, it's like this is a complicated. I have a complicated relationship with this film because I think on one hand there's so much about it that's wildly entertaining. On the other hand, I think the underlying politics of the film are incredibly gross and in places very disingenuous. But I made a commitment to attempt. I am going to attempt to be as journalistic as possible when talking about it. So I do want to talk about. I want to start with the conservative beers, the beer goggles of the conservative media, because it's very in these our social media land with YouTube, Instagram. Um, a lot of people are in fact searching for clicks. Um, and an easy way to if you're a conservative media outlet, the easiest way to get clicks is you know bash Hollywood upside the ears, and on some level, sort of on a ground level, they deserve it to a degree because they've become so lecture scold that to half the nation, and it's been just years and years. Like I would say it really started to get insufferable under Obama, and then just once Trump came into office, then it got worse and worse. Um, but it's also not a good if you're being honest about film criticism. So it's really popular. An easy way to get clicks from a conservative viewer base is to when the Academy Awards come out, shit on all the movies, and they never do this and this and blah 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 blah. Blah. It's a good driver of clicks. Um, And sometimes they have a good point. I would say good example is 2020 with 2024 when Emilia Perez was nominated for 14 awards. Now, if anyone's watched that film, it took me 3 whole days to chunk through it. Taking out the messaging that's in it. It is objectively terrible. Like, it's terribly made on every level. And as someone who likes musicals in particular, the musicals, the musical numbers in it are just hot garbage. So you could make an argument for that film. The only reason why this is nominated for 14 awards is because it's telling a message or story about you know it's a current issue thing, and it's important to talk about this issue, even though this movie is terrible. That's not It's not the case with One Battle After Another. If we're being honest and being truthful about our criticism, it is not a badly made film. It is in fact made by Paul Thomas Anderson, who is there is no question that he is a master auteur, and I doubt I'm not fully steeped in his body of work, but of what I have seen, I doubt the man has made a bad film. And I would say this is an off-putting film in a lot of ways. Having watched it again, it's not. I don't think it's bad. At times, once it drills down, you sort of have the setup in the beginning of the film that's leading to this story about a dad who needs to get back to his daughter, and that plot line is quite entertaining. And Leonardo DiCaprio is in fact really funny in it. And then you've got the daughter who's having to learn harsh truths about the world, and at the same time that her mom was kind of a piece of shit. So it's but you got to get there, and that's where that's where I think I'll sort of like haven't I should have bullet listed out how to sort of chunk through this, but I think the big problem factor is sort of where the most obnoxious stuff is in the beginning of the movie. And I think for the average person, and this is, I mean, it's not just, I'm not talking just right wing, because I talked to quite a few like center left people who watched like 15-20 minutes and then turned the film off and was just like, oh god, I'm not into this. And that's where you have to ask the question, like, should this have won Best Picture, which we'll get there. So what I would like to start with is this won six Oscars. So I'm going to sort of go through them bullet point and one by one and discuss what do I think it deserved, what don't I can't have an opinion on per se. So first, like starting at the bottom, best casting. And so here's the before I get into this, I do think the concept of Oscars the Oscars as a concept is sort of interesting now, because like when you're trying to label the best of anything, it's like it's art. It is a very subjective medium. So how do you judge one thing from the other, and everyone has very different tastes? And my feelings are that, because it really used to feel like the Super Bowl for me. And I do think humans at our core, we like a good competition. That's obviously why sports are so popular. Unfortunately, if you're more artistically inclined, like a lot of us tend to, I don't speak for everyone, but I know I don't know much about sports ball. But I did have I love movies, and I love the idea of it's like, oh, it's a competition, and like who's gonna win, and when in reality there's no objective way to quantify what's the best of any of these really are. Whereas with sports ball, you need to get the puck into the hoop and then you get 6 points. and at the end of the game, somebody has the most points, and so it's very, very cut and dry. So the concept is ultimately very a little silly, but still, like we like that we're as humans, we like the competition factor. It's fun. The last couple of years, I've done a couple of Oscar pools, and it's fun to. I lost $5 this year. Um, Enjoy it, Ben. Uh, um, it's fun to it's fun to sort of make your picks and see who's see which one is. I suppose it's gambling a little bit, like making your choices and going from there. But the concept in and of itself is, in fact, when you really think about it, just a little bit silly. But anywho, I digress. Starting with casting, and I am still going to go with. I think this was a stupid category to add. I mean, it's like I don't want to dare I pull a Chalamet here. I don't want to disrespect what casting directors do. It is very important, but I don't know that the general audiences of the Oscars potentially necessarily know what goes into it. And the reality is, when you've got a legendary or auteur director like Paul Thomas Anderson, you're not going to have a problem lining up a murderer's row of talent like Sean Penn or Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio del Toro. Like, that's not going to be a challenge for you. So I don't see the competition there, which again, I'll reiterate from an episode back in January. I think stunts would have been a more interesting category to add. And I also wanted talk about how shortchanged the sound department has gotten. Like, it used to be, you had best sound mixing and best sound design, and those are two very distinct things. And at some point along the line, I'd have to do the research. I don't know when. They crunched it down to just best sound, and sound is so important in getting a film made. Nothing will kill a film faster than bad sound, and I feel like that is a department that gets consistently shortchanged at the end of the day. So no, that's sort of neither here nor there with the film casting. It's like, what even is this? Like, of course you got good people. That's like, you can afford it, and people know you. Next up is best film editing, which I absolutely would not argue with, particularly with the end of the film. You got these really cool, the whole car chase. I'm going to use this as a specific example because there's a lot of really good editing in the film. You've got this car chase where Sean Penn's going one way. You've got Willa, who's in her other car, going the other way. You got this other you got sort of the wild card factor with the hitman coming, and then Leonardo DiCaprio is trying to like, he thinks she's with Sean Penn, but she's actually ended up here. And how that's cut together is really tense, and it's really tense and really gripping and incredibly well done. And there's a lot of examples of that in the film. So would not argue with that when next on this list, best supporting actor, Sean Penn. Another one that I don't think I could argue with. It's a really good, like, he's a great actor, and it's a great performance, and it's a strangely interesting performance, because on one level he is this cartoon character villain, but also the way that Sean Penn plays him, you can tell behind his eyes that there is some sort of mental illness there. Like, this is a guy who's not all there, and he's very, very, very obsessive in two different departments. He has his kinks, and then he sees this Christmas adventurers group as like the cool kids, and we'll get to, believe me, we'll get to that. He wants to be part of the cool kids and will do whatever, but also he's kind of got this BDSM kink related obsession with with black women. And there's this line he has sort of later, like they're in the car and he's actually talking up Willa's mother, and it's like, oh, okay, all right, but like, you don't this guy doesn't believe in anything, because you've got the protester group, and then essentially, and again we'll get to that, the authorities. And like, he doesn't really he likes the militantism of her, and how, like, when they actually get together at the beginning of the film, it's sort of this very bizarre. And I think this might be why it's sort of the start of the film is, I think, probably off-putting a little bit to a lot of people, where it's like you've got what's her name, Perfidia, who sort of seems to get off on the fact that she's doing the dominatrix thing with him, and he gets off on the sort of like dominatrix personality. And that's like, it's weird. It's very, very weird, just truthfully. But like, by the end of the film, it's like he believes in nothing. He just wants, he's got a lot of screws loose, and he's it's just like, he's just like, I need to be with the cool kids, and I'll do anything to get there. And in an interesting way, I do think this is like, this time around, I'm looking at it, it's like you could argue in a lot of ways that that cool kids club, that Hollywood is also a cool kids club that's hard to get into, and they ask you to sacrifice a lot to get there. So that's sort of like, my brain went there a little bit this time. But I do want to talk about it, because the Christmas Adventurers Club is the obvious, like the country is run by this cabal of white Christian nationalists, and they're puppeting the strings everywhere. And one of the things that I found truly gross, because obviously sort of the backdrop of this film is immigration, and this is one of the politically ugly things about the film, is they take, like, if you're somebody who believes in sort of border security and has concerns about open borders, they take a lot of those talking points that you just a normal everyday person would have, and they put them into the mouths of straight up white supremacists. And it's really, if, like, unless you're following just politics day in and day out, like, if you're just watching this film and this white supremacist makes this talking point, if you see your neighbor make a similar talking point, it also becomes the Leonardo DiCaprio meme of like, racist. Like, I think that's ugly, because there's people have legitimate concerns about border security that just absolutely don't involve racism at all. So putting legitimate concerns for that somebody might have in the mouth of a true villain, all of a sudden you're taking that and saying everyone who has these concerns is now is like this villain. And that's, I would say, truly disingenuous and truly ugly. That's just ugly politics. And the other big problem I have with this plot point, it's against, like, this idea that just there, at this point, I've lived in 7 states. I've got one more year in my 30s. I'm going to be 40 at the top of next year, and I've lived in 7 states. Most people in America, I think, are pretty cool, and not, like, I have yet to see the huge swaths of racists around. Like, there's this is where it comes into the, like, liberal beer goggles of seeing everything through the realm of like, everyone is racist. And it's just like, okay, this is like, it's maybe a little, I don't believe, in my experience, that does not hold water, in terms of all the various places I've lived and the various people that I've met. And do real true racists exist? Yes, they absolutely do. We have them here, but just like the blanket, it's everyone. Like it's annoying. It falls into this is annoying. Like it's annoying and it's not accurate. This is hyperbole if you're being truly honest with yourself. But that's my rant on the Christmas Adventurers Club. Though I will admit some of those scenes are genuinely funny. Like to use YouTube language at the very end of the film when Sean Penn meets up. And again, spoilers if you haven't seen it. When Sean Penn meets up with these guys again, and like he says he was reverse graped, and they look at him like he has two heads because it's just the most ridiculous. It's the most absurd thing anyone could say. It's legit. How they play it is legitimately funny. But anyway, moving on to best adapted screenplay. This is one that I can't really speak to because I definitely feel when it comes to talking about an adapted screenplay, you probably should have read the source material, which I haven't. I can say that I was rooting for Hamnet because I really, really enjoyed that movie. I think it's a really, really beautiful film. I don't think that like the writing is not like it's just a lot of it is just aggressively on the nose. Like this is a movie. You cannot deny that it is a movie with a political axe to grind. And because I would argue that because it's so clear, because it gets so heavy-handed, it's like that's something that rips you out of what's going on, and that's a problem. So I'm not sure about the best adapted screenplay. In terms of best director, it is a beautifully directed film, but I do think this year is an example of, and you see this quite a bit with a lot of sort of directors with a good body of work. I think here is an award for an impressive body of films, but this is not the best. This is not Paul Thomas Anderson's best film. I mean, certainly not get off the mic, but it's no shoo. Um, I would say like There Will Be Blood is a better movie than this, but it's like he has a good body of work, and I feel like this is yeah, like it's like I don't have a problem with him. Don't have a problem with him taking that one home. That's for his body of work. I would say it's earned. One thing I was just circling back to best supporting actor. I was rooting for Delroy Lindo a little bit. He's one of those sort of legacy actors that's consistently good in everything he's in. And he was quite good in Sinners. But this brings us to best picture, and that really begs the question: what is a best picture? And the reality is 2025 was not a spectacular year for films. The pool was not great. But it's like, are we talking about just production, production value, the technical, like how all of the pieces come together, as it cultural relevance, as a lot of people would argue. It's like, oh, this is a very relevant film for the time. Culturally relevant film for the time. Was it? Did it define that year? I don't think you could necessarily say in terms of movies that it defined it. Not in the way that, when I say that, I mean like, say, Titanic, where when Titanic won, people were going to that movie over and over and over and over again. And Titanic was the year of 1997. And there's really no question at all that it wasn't, that movie was Like that was the one that was, universally across the board. You know, it earned it on every level, and it was beloved by all of the public. And here's the thing: is that being popular, being popular does not necessarily mean you're the quote unquote best. You know, but also there are great movies that are popular, and one of the things that, and there's sort of lots been made that the Oscar pool dipped, not that the Oscar pool, the ratings dipped by another 9%, and this was back after 2008. Number of they expanded the number of awards from 5 to 10 in order to, mainly because people thought Dark Knight got shafted. So they included more space for popular films, and then they proceeded to not nominate broadly popular films. And what I would argue is that having films that were popular within the running helps the other smaller films that people don't necessarily know about it. And I think you saw this with Barbenheimer a couple of years ago, where I think a lot of people, you had a lot of fans of Oppenheimer, you had a lot of fans of Barbie, and more people tuned in for those two films. And, through that, if it's this average person who's not necessarily a cinephile, they might, learn about some of these other movies. And when you don't have that, and I don't know, the one that you could argue was that a little bit with Sinners, but because Sinners was very popular and quite entertaining and all that good stuff, but you didn't really have that this year, unfortunately. But did it deserve it? I was rooting for Sinners, in part because I had, I made a left field choice in the Oscar pool, and I had $5 riding on this thing. But also because I like horror, and Sinners was genuinely entertaining, and it made me think about politics just a little bit less. There's some sort of underpinning political themes in Sinners, but it wasn't so transparently political, at least to me. I did not find it so. But also it does say, so I think you could argue it probably on some level deserves to win, because it does say something about where we're at, and I would say an interesting way, and there in a world where there's no breakout, in a year where there was no breakout runaway winner. I think it says something about how Hollywood sees the country, and I guess this is where. So I like on a certain level, I would say yes, it should. There is an argument. There is an argument for it winning Best Picture on that level in the cultural relevance department. And this is where I just I think the politics are ugly. And a lot of where it sort of comes down to, and sort of where the sort of the conversation on this, I would say, really started is does this promote political violence? And I would say the answer is muddy, and I would say yes and no, because on one level they are, and this is one of the arguments that, as I understand it, has been made to me, that you look at, say, Pravidia, horrible person, abandons her kid and doesn't come back. Leonardo DiCaprio, aging stoner loser. And I would say he multiple times over the course of the film talks about, we did some bad shit back in the day. So on sort of minor levels, it's acknowledging that sort of Weather Underground type thing that they were doing wasn't good. And I would say the line that struck me a little bit more this time around seeing it was when the last time you see Benicio del Toro, when he's, the cops are pulling him over. And this is right after he booted, booted Leonardo DiCaprio out of the car. And it's like, what did you throw out the window? And he just says trash. And I like to me, I would guess I would read that as like a commentary on this, this guy's not a good, like he's not a good person. And I would say that Del Toro is the closest thing the film gets, and maybe this is part of what it was missing to me is just normal America, because I don't know that there's really an example in the film of just your everyday normie American. And Del Toro is the closest you get because he's a little bit more just zen, zen with all of it. But this is where I think when you move over to the other side, the only other sort of vector is law enforcement, and how they depict law enforcement is ugly because they're depicted straight up as like it's like you're living in a Hitlerian 1930s Germany, which again I think this is the liberal beer goggles. That's not that, like, you can argue like it's like so here's my, like, before moving on, this is my read about how when it comes to immigration, and again not an expert, but not again, so not an expert on the topic, but I would say, like, if you read the American people, I think they like a controlled border, they don't want chaos, and they like, basically and this is one of my least favorite things about the sort of the left-wing argument, is that it's always you just hate immigrants, which is not true. I think most people we like immigrants, just please follow our rules, and we would like violent people kicked out. When it comes to the gardener or the nanny, we're fine with them staying. That's sort of like normie, I would say normie America. And that's not really the film doesn't really present that. For all that immigration is the backdrop, it doesn't really present that argument in any meaningful way. And law enforcement are a Hitlerian force. And this is where, in some ways, I would argue that it does, maybe not, if not explicitly, I would say it doesn't explicitly promote violence. It promotes doing foolish things, because if you convince people that everyone you disagree with is Hitler, then all of a sudden taking protesting to the next level, that logically, like, wouldn't you do anything to stop Hitler? So that's where, like, if you get a mentally unhinged person, and I will say, like, it does, some of these protesters, it does present them as a little bit mentally unhinged. You could wind up you could wind up with people, doing bad things. And I also like the other thing, it's like this idea that that law enforcement officials are waking up jonesing to do harm to people during their day. I just don't believe that. That's not how people work. And there's plenty of law enforcement officials who are just incompetent. There are plenty that are incompetent. There are plenty who don't know what they're doing. And I'm sure, and I guarantee there's some who are outright nasty people. But I would say on average, their goal is not to get up and do harm. And I think that sort of insinuation is really gross. It's really ugly. And it's like if for people who have their beer goggles on, like, and take that super, like, you can make an argument that how immigration is being enforced right now is over the line and heavy-handed. Make that You can make that argument. When it Doing it in a hyperbolic way is not convincing to me, and that's sort of where this film lands a little bit on the politics, and that's why I think the politics are ugly. But I think it also think it's not to say that the film is total shit on the right is just not it's not aggressively fair, because it is actually, it's like there's part of it, like when you do lean to the right, when you know you're jumping into a film that is going to be explicitly left wing, there's a part of you that really wants to, it's like, I'm ready to friggin' hate this thing, like F these guys. And that's, like, again, it's not, I don't think that's fair. That's not the best way to go about criticizing a film. So yeah, does it deserve to win Best Picture? I would say, again, I was kind of rooting for Sinners because, again, I think I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more, and I will likely watch it more in the future than with this film. But I actually, it's like sort of like, it's like one of those, sitting there watching it another time. It's like, oh God, I don't hate this film. Like I think it's really disingenuous in some of the things it's presenting, but it's like, this is a well-made film. But I do think it does have a problem at the top of the film, because the top of the film that's where it's going to lose people, and that's where I think it has lost people, in my opinion. But once you get down to once you get down to the dad trying to find daughter, it gets quite good. So, and it's not as, I will admit to hyperbolizing myself. It's not as explicitly pro political violence, in maybe the way I have expressed up to this point, but it does get ugly in ways. And I think it's, for, if you're a normal sort of on the right person in a world post Charlie Kirk, it's who I'm going to say, it's like, I'll say it was lied about, taken out of context, and had attributed to him things that he absolutely did not say, which was, like, he's not here, but because, like, he had the gall to go onto college campuses and start debate, like he did nothing to people. And you can find, like, you can dig up clips of, there's so many clips of him out there, and you can find the clips where actual honest to God bigots and racists show up to TP USA events and suggest actual, like, honest to God racist bigoted things, and he absolutely owns them and kicks them out of line. So there's a lot of lies told about him. But it's like, if you're on the right, you're looking at this. We watched what happened on TV, and it's like, it's concerning, and you see people celebrating it online, and that's concerning. Like, when you see your average everyday person celebrating murder, that's like, that is a concern. You have to admit that is a legitimate, like, that presents legitimate reasons to worry. But in any case, I'm hopefully, like, this has been more politics in this one so far than I usually, and it's like, my God, I've gone on for 40 minutes on this, than I usually would care to do, because that's not really why I'm here on you. Like, I like movies. I want to talk about movies. Not because, and I feel that where I'm at with politics at this point is, I feel a little bit like Michael Clark Duncan in The Green Mile, just telling Tom Hanks, I'm tired, boss. Like, that's kind of where I'm at mentally with the state of the nation. And I'm even from a I would say normie American standpoint, I do look forward, even even not as a liberal, just for the noise to die down when Trump's tenure ends in 2029. I will not miss it. Just from a peace of mind standpoint. But anyway, I did. I saw two movies this weekend. One which I would 100% recommend, and one which I would, not recommend. The one I wouldn't recommend, Ready or Not Two, Here I Come. I was a big fan of the first film. It was this really energetic, action-packed, grisly horror action film with a great lead performance from Samara Weaving. And it worked as a one-off. It is a film that worked as a one-off. And with this one, they have to try and concoct and convolute a way for the same thing to be happening again. And what they want to do with the sequel is they want to tell a sister reconnecting story. But like the one they give us, it's a little bit weak tea. I would say there's a couple of good sequences in it, but it's just, again, not as strong, not as driving. And I feel like it was a waste of Samara Weaving's time to do it. It's just what they kind of do is they go the John Wick route in their, whereas the John Wick sequels sort of broaden out this really sort of cartoonish underworld of hitmen that exists unbeknownst to the world. They kind of do a similar thing with that, with unbeknownst to the entire world that's commanded by a cabal of Satanists. And it's just sort of like, I'm not buying it. It doesn't feel as personal. And it just doesn't work. And I'd be remiss not to mention that. And again, it's like I'm just saying I noticed it, just sort of the casual misandry through the whole thing. And again, full in mind, I would like to see Samara Weaving in more action movies. She's very, very intense and she's great. But you also definitely can point out, see, every male character is either stupid, ineffectual, or just a downright lunatic. And it's just like, okay, so this is the casual, not so subtle men bad thing. And it's just, it happens a lot, and I'm noticing it a lot more. Though I do think it's like it falls into like, okay, this doesn't ruin the movie necessarily, but it is annoying. Like, I am annoyed now at the like fire hose brush that we're taking one it's the we're taking this one demographic and we're gonna like fire hose the idea that they suck. But it was weak tea. It was good lead performance, weak tea film that really didn't sell its reason to exist. Now, the other one that's an absolute must-see is Project Hail Mary. Spectacular film. It's maybe a little long. I felt it took a little bit too much time to get off the ground. But once it gets off the ground and gets to the core of what the movie is, because basically the main plot is there's something wrong with the sun. You got to go on this mission to save the sun. And that's sort of the plot through line. But the core is this just unique friendship between Ryan Gosling and this faceless, weird-looking rock alien. And it's this beautiful story of friendship and two guys trying to, I would say just say two souls, because it's a rock. You don't know, guy, girl, I don't know. But it's like two souls stuck in space. They're trying to save their planets, and they really grow to care about each other. And all of those scenes are just freaking beautiful. And they, Lord and Miller, they animate it brilliant. They animate the, Rocky character beautifully. Ryan Gosling, it's mostly just him. The entire movie, it's predominantly just him, and he fully sells it. So I think he's an early contender for a Best Actor nomination, given this. And it's a feel good, and it's basically, if you saw the Spider-Verse films, they took their sort of wacky, in terms of cinematography and visuals, they kind of took the interesting lens with how they view narrative and plopped it into live action. And it's just this gorgeous looking film with a lot of practical sets combined with great CG. Um, well paced. Again, I was just like beginning maybe a little slow, but when I see again, that might, I can't think of anything that I would immediately cut from the film. So it's just it's so far it's the feel good movie of the year so far. This is a film that if you really do need to see it on a big screen if you can, because just the visuals are just that spectacular. Absolutely need to see it in a big screen, but you will leave the theater smiling. I promise you that. So check that one out. And that's pretty much it for in terms of what I've watched this buddy. What? And now the cat is going to moon the camera. Nobody wants to see your butt. Get out of here. It's pretty much my my what I've watched today or today this week. Hopefully, I mean, I would like to think I've been fair. I put in the effort, and hopefully, hopefully I've been fair. What can I say? In any case, everybody have an excellent week, and I will see you next time.